Well, thanks for taking the time to watch this training video. It's going to help us to keep the Kingdom Hall emergency lighting installation properly maintained. Now, this is a legal requirement. We need to actually check the functionality of the emergency lighting every month, and then every year we need to do a more detailed check. We'll go into that a little bit later. So what are we going to learn then? Well, first of all, we're going to consider what emergency lighting actually is. Then we're going to look at how it works, and then how do we test it, and then we're going to have a look at the documentation that it's necessary to maintain to show that we are actually looking after our emergency lighting in the proper way. You've just been looking here at some examples of the kind of emergency fittings that we're going to be dealing with. You might recognise some of these from the Kingdom Hall. So we'll be looking at those in a moment. But first of all, let's look at our first point. What actually is emergency lighting? So as you can see from this, and you can pause it and read it at your leisure if you're so inclined, but basically emergency lighting, it's a backup. If there's a problem like a mains failure, or sometimes it could be a fire, the emergency lighting will come on and allow whoever is occupying the building at the time to make their way to the escape routes, which will be identified by these legends, which normally consists of green running men and arrows. So that's what emergency lighting is. How does it actually work? We'll have a look at that next. To understand how emergency lighting works, first we have to understand how a very basic, normal, non-emergency light works. Now, power will come into the building, whichever building it is, into a distribution board or a fuse board, which then divides the power up into circuits which are fed via circuit breakers or MCBs. The outgoing circuit, in the case of a lighting circuit, will comprise of, first of all, a switch. Now you'll see here that the red section of outgoing cable is red, and that's just indicating that up to the point where it comes into the switch, the circuit at that point is live and has voltage on it. But of course, because the switch is open, the light will not illuminate. But as soon as we close the switch, then you'll notice that this part of the cable goes red, because the voltage is now on that part of the cable, and the light illuminates to its full intensity. So that's the normal light fitting. Let's swap it for an emergency light fitting. You can see here that there's an extra element being added. It's this emergency pack up at the top, and it consists of a battery and an electronic circuit. You'll notice also that it's fed from the permanently live side of the switch, so the emergency pack is always energized whether the light switch is in the on or the off position. What does it do? Well, it ensures that the battery is kept charged whether the light switched on or off. It keeps this green light here on. That's the green charge light that indicates whether the charging circuit is working correctly. The electronic circuit detects a power outage, and when a power outage occurs, it turns the emergency light on. To begin with, we'll turn the non-emergency element of the light fitting on. That's just the normal running light. So that's on when we switch the light switch on, and you'll see that the light comes on at the normal intensity that we're used to. But now if we simulate a power cut by removing the supply, in other words by turning off the MCB at the distribution board, we see that the light switches from the mains power to battery power and now illuminates at a fairly reduced level of intensity. And that's because it's running on battery power rather than mains power. You also might notice that the green charge indicator lamp has become extinguished, and that's as a result of the loss of mains power. So what that means is that this light will now only stay on as long as that battery has energy in it, and that of course will eventually run out. Now when we're doing the monthly test, we're just checking that the light comes on for a short period of time. But when we do the annual test, we have to make sure that that battery has got enough life in it to keep the light lit for 3 hours. So finally, it's worth noting that the emergency light remains on whether the switch is on or off. So I thought it would be good at this point to review what we've learned so far. So I've compiled some review questions. Firstly, what's the purpose of emergency lighting? What differences are there between emergency and non-emergency light fittings? What's the purpose of the green indicator light normally found within an emergency light fitting? And then I've given you a little bit of homework. What's the difference between maintained and non-maintained emergency lighting? So you might want to pause there and have a closer look at those questions and maybe note down the answers, and when you've done that, continue and we'll look at some of the possible answers which we've got just listed here on the screen. So it might again be a good idea just to pause at this point and go through your answers to make sure that you've got something that pretty well corresponds to what we've got here. Well done if you have, but it doesn't really matter if you haven't. You can always go over the material again and pick up on what you've missed out on. And don't worry if some of it's a little bit difficult to understand. We all learn at different rates. We all have different background knowledge. So at the end of the day, if there's anything you're really struggling with, just contact me and we can sort that out. Now we can start to think about testing, but first we need to consider the requirements stipulated in the job sheets for this particular task. There are two of these. One is for the monthly check and the other is for the annual check. They're both very similar, as we shall see. You'll notice I've just highlighted here that it needs to be a trained operative carrying out these tests. So this is what's happening now basically. You're going through the training, and by the time you've completed this, you'll qualify to test emergency lighting. So let's just quickly run through these points. I've highlighted them just so you can see them basically. The first one is check that each luminaire is operating properly in mains power mode and that green LED indicator light is working. The failure of the mains power supply to the lighting circuits can be simulated by tripping the circuit breaker. We saw that in the explanation earlier. And then during this period, all emergency lights and exit signs should be examined to ensure that they have changed over to battery power. Remember, that's when the light went a little bit dimmer because the mains power had been lost. At the end of this test period, restore the mains power to the lighting circuit and check that each luminaire has changed back to mains power, so it's come back to full brightness again. And then finally we need to record the data in the fire safety logbook provided by the branch office, and that is located in the cleaning room stuck to the back of the door. What I would say at this point is don't even try to remember all these details now. Believe me, it's far easier and it'll become far clearer when we're actually going through the practical process of doing this at the Kingdom Hall. Believe me, you'll find it a lot easier than it appears to be when we're looking at these lists of requirements. This is the job sheet for the yearly inspection, and to be honest, it's almost exactly the same as the annual inspection. There are only two differences. So you can see just down this side here where I've ticked the points that correspond exactly to the requirements on the monthly test sheet. The only two differences are the ones I've highlighted in red, and the first one being the main difference is that we have to turn the power off for a minimum of 3 hours. So that's the big difference. And the second difference is that after that time, it's quite likely, to be honest, that some of the emergency lights are going to fail that particular test. So any fittings that do not stay illuminated for the full 3 hours need to be replaced by a qualified electrician. So in that case we need to get in touch with the somebody on the maintenance team to actually report that that is the case. There's an important note at the end, and it just mentions that there needs to be 2 volunteers present at all times. That really is just because we need to use the loft ladders. We need to lower them out of the loft hatch, and it requires 2 operatives to be able to do that. Now we can start looking at the actual test procedure. Now, as it says in the note here, at our Kingdom Hall we've got 25 emergency light fittings, and they're spread across 6 circuits, and we've just looked at the requirements of the job sheets. So when you start thinking about all that amount of material to cover, on the surface of it, it appears that there must be a tremendous amount of work to actually be carried out. Let me assure you, there isn't. It's so simple and quick that you wouldn't believe it. All you really need to do is to be able to walk around the Kingdom Hall twice and count up to 25 without taking your shoes and socks off, and you'll be fine, believe me. But the first thing we have to do is gain access to the roof void. So there's just a picture here that's showing the loft, the hatch that goes up to where the ladders are kept in the roof void. Now, part of our training will be to actually see how we safely negotiate the process of lowering those ladders to the floor. So that will be covered in the training, and as it says there, full training and instruction will be provided on site. The next step, we need to familiarise ourselves as to where the distribution board is. Well, that's in the plant room at the back. So once you've found that, if you open the lower lid, you will see all the outgoing circuits which provide power to the various parts of the Kingdom Hall. Now, all the lighting circuits have got a red dot next to them. So when you come to the relevant stage in the test procedure, you'll need to turn those particular MCBs to the off position. So the little toggle switch there needs to be moved over towards the red dot. That, of course, will all be explained fully as we're doing the training. Before the test, would you please review these 3 documents? First of all, there's a drawing of the Kingdom Hall showing all the emergency lighting positions. Secondly, there's a sequence of operations to follow. And thirdly, there's a list of locations and the number of all the emergency fittings. So it'd be helpful to either have a printed copy or an electronic copy as you're conducting the test. What I'll do, I will publish I'll post a PDF document in the Kingdom Hall Maintenance WhatsApp chat in the very near future. So now you're ready to conduct the test, and obviously that has to be done at the Kingdom Hall, and the first time you do it will be part of the training programme, so no need to worry about anything. You'll be guided through all the various steps, and I don't think you'll find it difficult. Just a tip, if you walk anti-clockwise around the Kingdom Hall, because the north side of the hall doesn't have any emergency fittings on it, so that could just speed things up a little bit. So once the testing's been done, of course, we have to complete the documentation, so we'll have a look at that next. The first document is the job hazard analysis. We'll go through that on the day when we actually lower the ladders from the roof void, and I would imagine that that's going to be the same for each time, so we can get a copy of that printed ready, and that can go in the document that I end up posting on the chat. And then we've got, first of all, the 1 monthly test. You'll notice there's a small area on the top where we actually have to record how long the job has taken us, so it'd be good to fill that in. And also, if we could just perhaps sign and date the sheet so we can see who's done it, if we've got any questions. If there's any observations, just note them down. It's the same for the 12-month test as well. How long the job's taken, sign and date, any observations, and of course if there's anything that needs attention, then it would be good to follow that up just by having a word with somebody on the Kingdom Hall maintenance team or the Kingdom Hall operating committee. But I'll include these documents in the PDF file that I download onto the maintenance chat, so it'll all be there in one document. So at this point I'd just like to say thank you very much indeed. Thanks for looking at the video, and thanks for your willing spirit in helping to keep our Kingdom Hall up to the standard that we would expect of a place of true worship in our community. Thank you.